WNST check in, and I take the pulse of all of my friends who cover the Ravens and have been around, the people that I've shared some wisdom and some heartache over the course of time. I think I met this guy in January of 1986 when I walked into the Baltimore Sun. We're now 32 years later. He is a legendary, venerable columnist and pundit, longtime Baltimore Sun, now with the BaltimoreRavens.com. And, of course, you can find him out on Twitter at John Eisenberg with all sorts of insights. Tell you what, buddy, you and I have been through a lot of things. This one was a new one, right? And I would just say this, for the first time, Luke and I were speechless. Like, we literally were standing next to each other. We were speechless. I walked down, and as I walked down the steps into the cold night, I thought to myself, this might be it for Harbaugh. This might be it for Ozzie. This might be middle of the week, Steve just saying, you know what, I'm just going to start the whole thing over again, or not, because Steve's never done that before.
Well, it's definitely, that kind of loss definitely brings in drastic thoughts. What's the reaction going to be? I mean, it was as devastating as one that I have seen, certainly in the regular season. I can't remember one, that was worse. There's no doubt. I mean, I've been listening to and hearing people talk about, let's rank this on the worst Ravens losses ever. The Billy Cundiff kick, the loss at home to Indianapolis in the playoffs in 2006. I mean, those sort of take the cake. But just in terms of sort of a regular season, punch to the gut, this is right there. This is right there with the worst because they were in. I mean, they were in the playoffs and they had it, and then they were just out. So
they haven't lost a lot of games like that, in the course of their history, regular season games even. Like, I mean, I remember Steve Smith beating them one day on my birthday, running into the Ray Lewis tunnel with 22 seconds left and the ball going over somebody's head. We've seen it a little bit more the last couple of years, just on a regular, garden variety October day. But to have that be the last play call of Dean Pease's career and to have it just sort of have a playoff game wither away, in front of everyone. I can't think of anything more dramatic in that way in front of the home crowd, which was, quite frankly, as we've been outlining here for months, a lot different than it used to be at the old ballpark.
Oh, well, definitely the crowd was a lot smaller. I will say the ones that were there and the ones that were there and cold were making a lot of noise at the end of that game. It was a pretty good environment. It sort of had that feel of, the fans are up, they're cheering, all they need is one stop. We've seen it 1,000 times. But, those fans that do that have been disappointed a lot. I mean, that's the problem. I mean, this team has just lost a bunch of games in that fashion in the last couple of years alone. And so, it's to have it happen then, I think as I wrote after the game, I said, losing to Antonio Brown and a great play, that hurt. This is going to be 3 times as hard. I think 3 times as hard because you're home, you're playing Andy Dalton, some receiver you've never heard of beat you on a play. I mean, I rode down in the elevator with the Bengals assistant coaches, and they were incredulous. Incredulous is the only word I can use. They said, how did he get so open? And how did he, once he caught the ball, just roll on to the end zone? I mean, they were amazed. So, listen, and that's coming from guys that are in the game. So, that it's one of those ones that's not going to go away.
Well, and John, the sting of this thing is, 1,000-fold given the empty seats and given where that is. And I don't, I wrote 18,000 words, some of it in your honor. I use you can look it up phrase, by the way, about the history of all of this. But you've been through this too, and the last time the fans quit on the team quit on the city, right, and left. And I hate to see this. I don't know where it's going. I don't know, but I don't think there's anything they're going to do in the off season that's going to sell tickets. I don't think they're going to sign a guy that's going to sell tickets or fire Harbaugh and bring in whatever Sean McVay thing that you could position if it was about selling tickets in the old Carney sports way vernacular of thinking about it. But I don't know what the right answers here are. I mean, I know the stay the course thing has been the way that Steve has managed it, but I also know that this is a weirder offseason than any other offseason that this organization has had, or I think any organization in the history of the city's had, quite frankly.
Well, the Sean McVay new blood scenario is an interesting one, and that would, I think, I think it would sell a few tickets, or at least ease the sting if you say we're just going in a different direction. I'm not, I don't think it's not going to happen, number one. And, I don't know that it's the smart thing to do, number two, but I'm saying just in terms of sort of changing the story and maybe selling some tickets, that might work. I mean, something new is always interesting to people, but it wouldn't sell a ton. I'm fine with getting into this. I mean, I think certainly the fact that the team has missed the playoffs 4 out of the last 5 years has had a drag on enthusiasm, and also, I mean, as I wrote in a column at Ravens.com, they finished 4 games behind the Steelers this year, and 3 games behind the Steelers last year. And fans aren't stupid, and then and they can see, even though as close as you come to the playoffs, I mean, you're losing your grip on losing sight of first place in the AFC North. That kind of stuff is troubling. But having said all that, I do feel like the empty seats, while there is definitely always some local factors involved, I think the biggest story of all that, I think that is an NFL problem more than anything. If you look around at these other games, there's empty seats everywhere. You get on the red zone, you watch these other games, there's empty seats everywhere. And I don't think, so someone that leads someone to say, oh, well, it must be the protests and all that. I honestly, certainly that's a factor. I don't think it's that high on the list of things that has caused, the attendance to drop. And, I think there's many factors, a lot of it having to do with the product itself. And, I think it is a league issue, a professional football issue, more than it is any individual franchise issue.
John Eisenberg joining us here. He is Be More Eisenberg. And, of course, his book, The Iron Man and the Streak, available as well. And you can find all that information out on his Twitter at Be More Eisenberg, as well as his column at BaltimoreRavens.com. So I guess in picking up the pieces and in being the outraged fan, and the disappointment and sort of the disgust when you lose, 4th and 12. And if you had told any Raven fan they'll be 9-6, it'll be 20 degrees. It'll be New Year's Eve. The game will be flexed. It'll be the fourth quarter. You're going to have a lead, and it's going to come down to 4th and 12. I think on the face of that, everybody would say, well, that sounds kind of exciting. I would think we'd be playing in Kansas City or Jacksonville next week. So, for all of that and for all of the disappointment and wanting to beat up Harbaugh and Flacco and anybody else, Flacco got better. The offense got better. The line got better. They got healthier at various points. Lots of, ifs and buts and candies and nuts, and the guys they drafted and guys that got injured, and Alex Lewis and Dennis Pitta and, Zach Orr and unfortunate circumstances and Marshall Yanda and all the things that went wrong. Jimmy Smith at the end, right? It's not a bad run, but it's also 4 out of 5. It's got all these things that if I'm Steve Bisciotti and I'm up in the middle of the night thinking the way Steve Bisciotti would think, I'd be looking up at the stars and saying, all right, is Ozzie going to be my general manager the next time we win a Super Bowl? Is John going to be the coach? Is Joe Flacco going to be the quarterback? Are we saying in the next 3 years that's going to happen? That Joe at 33, 4, 5, Harbaugh in year 11, 12, 13, Ozzie in year 23, 4, 5, given the drafts, given where we've been. And I do think a lot of this, no one beats Ozzie up, but the drafts here recently and again this year, now that we've got one more year in on Correa and some of the higher, Max Williams, some of the higher draft picks, that until there was a level of productivity there, you can't be 12-4, John. That's when you're 12-4 is when, everybody, it turns into a little Marlon Humphrey, because I saw that happen with the Boulwares and the Sharpers and the Herrings, and that's how that thing got special 20 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, as you alluded to earlier, there's a mixed bag. I mean, there's really conflicting. You talk about all the things they overcame this year, and they did overcome a lot of injuries and all that, but they also had a lot of breaks. Tremendous breaks with the schedule. 11 games against teams that did not make the playoffs. And they went, I believe, 9-2 in those games. 0-5 against teams that made the playoffs this year. So that is a telling number right there. So, that is they played all those backup quarterbacks. You think they're going to roll into Green Bay and just roll over the Packers with Aaron Rodgers there, you're wrong. So they had things go against them, those injuries. They had things go for them, the schedule. So, the bottom line is, as I said before, they were 4 games out in the division. So, I don't think you are where you want to be, and you're right that certainly the draft is, it has to go back to that. You just have so many guys that, you are hoping that you'll get more out of. And again, those conflicting themes, of course, you swing and a miss on maybe some second or third round picks, but what they are good at, they have found the Band-Aids to get you through. You swing and a miss on a defensive lineman you draft, but you find Michael Pierce, undrafted free agent, who's an excellent run stopper, and they found a guy there. Onwasu, all right, a linebacker. You miss on Correa, but you hit on, they had 2 undrafted free agents starting.
Luke always likes to bring up, though, that the reason Weddle and Jefferson are here is that they missed on the kid from Florida State and certainly missed with Elam, too. So,
totally true. And those are free agents. They're spending money on those guys. I'm talking about, finding guys, Judon in the 5th round. They've been missing on the higher picks and hitting on some lower picks and some undrafted guys. It's kind of weird. But I think you're 100% right. If you're really going to have a good team, you got to hit on some of these higher picks. Look what Humphrey brought to the secondary this year. That's a premier player, and he's going to be really good, and that's what you should be doing with your first round pick. Mosley, same thing. Ronnie Stanley, same thing. You get guys that can really carry you. So you definitely have to have more of that, and the absence of that from second and third round picks is hurting.
Where's this go, John? You pick up the pieces here. There's going to be a state of the Ravens. What's the reporter in you expecting to see from Steve Bisciotti? I expect him to be a little beleaguered, quite frankly, because I think the whole thing is a little beleaguered right now, and I don't know what he can say to these people about the knee, which is all I hear about, quite frankly, because, I guess I'm from Dundalk. I don't know what to say. I've written at length about it. I see it in the upper deck. I think the knee is a big problem, and I think all the other things we've outlined are a problem, but I don't know where the solution is. And John, everybody I've talked to in the building out there, and I don't know that I have a strong answer for this as somebody who's watched this for a couple of decades like you, but they all say, well, we need to win. And I think to myself, well, you came 4th and 12 away from winning and going to the playoffs, and you might have gone to the Super Bowl and won in Minnesota. Who knows? We'll never be able to knock on that door at this point. Certainly you could have won in Kansas City. Certainly you could have gone to New England and played the kind of game that you could win, given how this team was constructed and the health and Suggs and how it was going at the end and Flacco in the running game and who knows the weather and all of that. So I can conjure all that up, but, that honestly, that's not where you are right now, and, I just wonder about the demeanor for Steve, and people weren't coming and the team was winning. 9-6. I know it's not perfect. I know it's not the Steelers, but John, if the bar's 12-4, nobody's going to be there. And I remember when the Orioles would say this to you back, in your columnist days. Well, we'll win, and when we win, they'll all come back. The seed, sure they will. They're never coming back with the Orioles because they've split the fan base and all the money's in D.C. With the Ravens, it was always this unique, special, small market. There aren't, we don't have a metropolis here. We don't have Fortune 500 companies here. When people stop buying skyboxes or stop buying tickets, there's not a line out the door to buy those at that premium level, at that money, at this point in time. This is a little bit disconcerting to me because the kid in me who saw Burt Jones play here in 77 and then saw the team gone 7 years later, and I know the lease is up in 9 years, and I know how itchy the league is. The league will be glad to move your franchise to London for you 10 years from now, right? They will, and put $4 billion in their pocket, right? That's the way the league works.
Well, that's true, and I obviously think this is it's been an excellent franchise. I think there's a great future here. I don't really concern myself with that. However, the scenario you paint is correct. The Colts sold out every game for years. It was the same story, and empty seats can be a prelude to something. It's what you don't want to see. The difference, back then, of course, the team started to lose, and it was just, the fans turned on the owner, and they had every right to turn on the owner. And, it became horrifying what was happening. And here I will say that that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, that's the part that's bothered me. It feels like they've turned on the franchise, on the owner. They're looking for him to say something in this. That I don't know what you're looking for other than the invoice, and we gave it all we could, and we lost out on the playoffs. I think it's a very, very. I don't think Steve has ever, for one night during his ownership, looked up at the sky and thought, what if half my fan base goes away one day? Then what happens? I don't think that was ever on their list of concerns of things about making the scoreboards bigger, or adding escalators, or doing the type of things. They've never had to worry about selling tickets. They just had to worry about winning football games, right? And winning football games should sell tickets, and it has for 22 years. That's not where we are right now. It's a different world, and I don't know this world, and I don't think Steve knows this world. I don't think we've seen this world, quite frankly. But I do know this. The invoices are going out in 6 or 8 weeks, and I don't know that there's anything that's going to make someone who's feeling like I have a $1,700 invoice. I'm going to renew mine because I'm a Ravens fan and it's what I do and I can afford it and whatever. But I think for a lot of other people, this is going to be a real ugly period because there's no Ray Lewis coming off the hill to come and dance for them again and promise 12-4 next year, because I don't think they're going to look like that for the next 6 months, right?
I think that's where there's really going to be an interesting off season in the ticket office more than anything, and because that's where the story will be. I will go back and say again, though, Nestor, I do believe this is not just a Baltimore issue.
Sure.
I believe this is an NFL issue. The league, and this has been going on for years, and it's just kind of coming home to roost. I mean, the league is now competing with itself in people's homes. It's very hard to get up and leave when, or go on a rainy day or a snowy day when you've got a 65-inch flat screen and, the beer's in the fridge and it's a lot cheaper. And it's nice at home.
It really is. I mean, we've had enough Monday night games and Sunday night games and Thursday night, that every time I do sit at home and watch it, I'm like, well, this is kind of nice. I could be in Cincinnati or Cleveland today, but I'm here, with my cat.
That is the reality. That is what is the fight. I think that's the number. To me, I think it's the number one thing. I think the world's changed. Listen, I was in the newspaper business for all these years. You know what? The newspaper business was gutted by the internet. And, thank God there's a few papers hanging around and doing okay, but things change. I am a testament to that. And so, you better be able to adjust to the new situation, whatever it may be, whatever industry you're in. And I believe professional sports is going to have to deal with this. It is very nice to be at home. The TV coverage is so great. It's tough, and to me, that is the number one thing. Why you sit on the red zone, you watch those empty seats everywhere. That's the deal. Sure, there's other factors, and and we could talk ad nauseum about them, but I think that's going to be the biggest one. And so, it's a fight, and what you have to count on is that the roar of the crowd is still better than anything. The roar of the crowd is, what drew you there in the first place, being part of something. And so do you want to continue to be part of something, or do you want to, just have your own little fiefdom at home and, you're sort of like an independent contractor, being with the part of the larger thing, being, the Ravens fans. So, how do you want to do it? Okay, you can stay at home. It's great. You are not quite the same without being there. So, everybody has to make those decisions. I can't make it for them. I like the roar of the crowd, but everyone is different. So it's a real gut check time. And I think that's where you're seeing the rub with, and it's not just the Ravens. I think it's all of pro sports.
Well, then there's the Ravens' whole thing about, all right, if being better and having a better football team will sell these tickets, John, then it's about, okay, who's going to be the defensive coordinator at this point? Who's going to run the offense next year? What happens to Greg Roman? Where are they with Marty Morningwig? Where are they with Flacco and with this offensive line and Ryan Jensen getting paid and the Lewises and the Saraguses and the Yondas and these guys coming back and maybe being healthy next next year. I mean, there are just a ton of needs going into a very, very complex offseason, right?
Yeah, there's a lot, and I mean, there's always evolution. There's always change when you don't get it done. I think a new, and I love Dean Pease. I am a Dean Pease fan. I think he's done a great job here for many years. With Ray Lewis gone for the most part. That first year, Dean it's the old cliche. He has forgotten way more football than most of us know. So, having said that, I think some new blood, let's give it a shot. I mean, there were a lot of lost leads here in the fourth quarters of games. And so, with none worse than this last one. So, give it a new shot, some new blood there. Offense, let's see what happens there. I don't know. I mean, Marty, I thought at the middle of the season, there was no way an offensive coordinator can survive, when you're at the bottom of the league. The second half was better, but, the last game was troubling. The first half of that game was just baffling to me. But you got the season on the line, and that was just amazing. 8 possessions, 1 first down. It looked like they forgot how to play football. So, I don't know what'll happen there. My instinct tells me Marty probably will be back. I don't know. You've got Greg Roman sitting there. If you wanted to go with someone else, Roman, I think, did a nice job with the running game this year. So, but I don't know. I
don't know what makes them a 12-win team next year in anyone's perception or in the reality of the moment, given where Suggs was and what you got out of him and Weddle and Flacco with a bad back. I mean, I could see Flacco coming back next year and being fine. I thought he was more than fine the last 8 weeks of the season.
More than fine.
Yeah, more than fine to win where he is in his career. If you give him an Alex Collins that can run around, if you give him a tight end, if you give him time, if you give him professional National Football League wide receivers, right? And that's been the missing ingredient in all of this, is that you're judging Marty Morningwig and Joe Flacco on Griff Whalen as the number 3 receiver, Michael Campanaro, and you're also, judging him without a Marshall Yondon, without tight ends, and without a running game. And, this thing started with Terrence West and Kenneth Dixon. It ended up with some kid that got thrown out of Seattle, right?
Yeah, and that's probably the best thing that happened this year. That kid's pretty good. That touchdown on Sunday, when he reversed field and made that, that is the kind of play that the Ravens have not had for a couple of years. Playmaking. I wrote in a column and said, that looked like Barry Sanders. That was phenomenal.
4th and 29, Ray Rice vintage.
Yeah, if they win the game, that's the play they're talking about, because that's the best offensive, make something out of nothing that I've seen in a while from the Ravens offense. That was just a great play. I think, whether or not he's a 1,000-yard rusher, I don't know. He's a piece of the puzzle, that's for sure. So I think you've got some explosion there. And what else you need on offense? No question. You got to go offense in the draft this year. Some playmakers, some weapons, some tools. You got to give him some things. Okay, if he swung and missed at Perryman, God knows we've been over that 1,000 times. You got to keep swinging, because that's what you need. You have to try to figure that out, because there's just not enough weapons there. Difference makers, playmakers. Look what happens when you stumble onto one. You've got Collins. Look what happened. You have to find a receiver that can do that, a young one, a tight end, as you mentioned. I'm glad that they took Marlon Humphrey, not O.J. Howard, in the first round, because I think Humphrey, I think that's the most important position on the team now, other than quarterback, is cornerback. You have to have some guys. And so I think that looks like an excellent pick. But having said that, they need some speed at tight end. And so, you need weapons. This offseason needs to be weapons. Find some things. And, am I on repeat with that? I guess I am. But,
we won't repeat about fine DBs. The ball's going over our head for 3 years, too. And how did they lose? The ball went over their head, right? And I'm sure they would say, well, maybe Tavon Young would have been that draft pick that would have made that play. Ifs and buts. I don't. And they're going to have some players coming back. This was not. You better hope they're more healthy. If they're as banged up next year as they were this year, they won't be very good anyway, right?
Yeah, well, they were very banged up, and they're going to have a tougher schedule next year. And so, you got to stay healthy. And look, as it was, they were down to the nubbins at cornerback. Those guys get hurt. And so, I don't know, but I think that they were able. Part of the reason they were able to withstand those injuries is they did a pretty good job of building up the depth. Even if you miss on some of those high picks like we were talking about earlier, you found some pieces in unlikely places, and the depth was decent. But what you really need is those premier players, and what you really need is offensive guys that can take a play and make something out of it. There just needs to be more of that.
John Eisenberg and the streak and the Iron Man stuff, all available. You can find him out on the internet, of course, at BaltimoreRavens.com, where he is columning, and we're all awaiting the state of the Ravens press conference, as well as out on Twitter at @BMoreEisenberg. Happy New Year to you, man. I mean, these are the dog days, right, where the Ravens are going into the tank, and we're not going to have a real football game for 9 months to evaluate anything, and then we have the Orioles doing really not. Is there anything you want to say about the Orioles? Because I only have you on once a month or so. This whole Machado episode just it's a slapstick off season where if you were writing about it 3 weeks ago, they're going to deal him, and I was sitting here saying they're not going to deal him because it has to go to the old man's desk. It's never going to happen, man.
Yeah, half the reason I left the Sun, I was tired of yelling about the Orioles, Nestor. So. So...
And that was a long time ago now.
It was a long time ago. So honestly, I'm hoarse on that subject still, all these years later. But, and these last few years have been very enjoyable.
Agreed.
So that's been fun. But, there's no way you can like what's going on this off season. It's a troubling set of circumstances. There's no pitching right now. The off season, really nothing's happening other than the Rule 5 draft. Look like, So,
and then Zach Britton got hurt. I mean, it's like the black cat's back. Remember the black cat? Peter had that. You're old enough to remember that. Yeah. Remember that?
Unbelievable. So I'm sure there'll be some moves made and whatnot, but certainly not enough pitching right now to even talk about what might happen in 2018 with the Orioles. So, I think there'll be some moves made. I hope that there'll be something that can jigger up some enthusiasm, because right now, I mean, there's no way you could roll out. I mean, they don't have a complete team, period. So, not even close. So,
here's what you can do. Take the next 9 months off, do a little bit of and work on your next book, okay? I mean,
well, I am doing that.
Well, see, if the Orioles were better, if they would have gotten Stanton in the offseason, you'd be watching baseball with Wick. You know what I mean? You wouldn't have time to catch it. Tell everybody about your next book, because this is coming out in September, right?
Yes, I'm finishing it up right now. They're going to come out back-to-back. Don't think it's taken me 5 years to do these back-to-back projects, but they're going to come out within a year of each other. But I have written a book. It's called The League. It is football history. It is about the first years of the National Football League through the eyes of the owners, the real architects of the league, the guys that took it when it was a nothing league and dragged it through the early years when no one cared.
What years are those that you're chronicling?
20s. 30s, and really the 40s.
Okay.
And I'm focusing on Burt Bell, Tim Mara, the original Mara, Art Rooney, the original Rooney, George Preston Marshall with the Redskins, and George Hallis with the Bears. That's really your inner circle. And, they tried to beat each other's brains out on the field, yet they sat in meetings and worked together. And it's just this crazy dynamic. Half of them were they're gamblers and bookies. And the early days of the NFL is an amazing tale. And I really enjoyed writing about these guys, how they fought and then got along and just sort of eventually made mistakes, but did more right than wrong, and eventually found themselves, creating something that none of them ever imagined would be as big as it became.
Well, I can't wait to. I haven't had you explain it to me like that before, so I'm kind of into all that. So that would be kind of fun. And I almost like when you were giving me the intro to it, I was almost hearing like the NFL Films music, the Swiss music underneath. The men who built the game, as chronicled by
it's the
John
guys
Eisenberg.
Off the field. George Marshall alone, is remembered, rightfully so, is probably the biggest racist in the history of the National Football League. It still had an all-white team in Washington, D.C. in 1961. But an unbelievable historical figure as well. So, I mean, basically ran through the rules that made the forward pass legal, and he invented the postseason. And it's all this crazy stuff. I don't think people know the story. And so
he invented the forward pass. I mean, how do you top that? That's Yahtzee. You win.
He didn't invent the forward pass, but there were rules in place that kept teams from passing the ball in the 20s. And then along in the 30s, and he had a theater background. His background was in the theater, and he said, this has to be a show. And so he basically ran through the rules that eliminated all the restrictions on the forward pass. So that's the guy that did it. And yet he's also, this unbelievable racist, fascinating figure, and there's more of it. And I just had once I sunk my teeth into this, this was really, really good storytelling terrain.
Sometimes they write themselves. I'm glad you're telling the stories. We'll be following you. We all had an early exit to our off season here, and now the tumult begins. John, we'll be in touch, man. Have a great off season. Stay warm out there, all right?
All right, I will. You too. Thank you.
Always appreciate you. One of my mentors, one of my favorite people, John Eisenberg. You can find him at Be More Eisenberg on Twitter. Longtime Baltimore Sun columnist, now writing at BaltimoreRavens.com. Doing a great job out there as well. Always some inside poker, as they say, when you're reading John's work out there as well. You can find me out in the BuyAToyota.com audio vaults 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from wherever you happen to be. The morning newspaper ships to your email inbox at 7 a.m. That's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life, guaranteed. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.